Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. This is Rich from Dashboard Gear. Today, we got a great session for you. We're going to be talking about SQL Joins. Now, last week, we began the session talking about the basics of SQL, and you want to check that out if you're a new SQL person. So you can catch that in our library out on YouTube as well. So thank you for joining, whether you're on the Facebook side or the YouTube. We appreciate you watching, and hopefully you gain some valuable information out of this. Now, some of you are experienced with SQL, and you're probably somewhat familiar with SQL joins. Others of you may not even know what a SQL join is. So I'm going to try and start at the beginning with each of those. So with that, I'm going to jump over to my screen here and talk about SQL joins. Now, what a SQL join is, it's used whenever you need to query data across more than one table. For example, I want to see their employees and their positions. The most common scenario of that is when you want to get a description, let's say, from a table. So for instance, I have an account number and I want to get the account description from the accounts table or the company. In this case, I have the employee in a position and I want to get the position description from that table. So that's the most common use of a join. Now, before I get into the specifics of a join, what I want to do is talk a little bit about review what we covered last week on a SQL statement and the various parts that are there. Now, when you do a SQL select statement, there are some basic parts to it. The first part is select, and then it was the fields that you wanted to return from the item. So in this particular case, we are selecting the employee and position from the employee table, and then we added a filter clause where company equals 1. Today, we're not going to get into the filter clause anymore. So on my examples, you're going to see that I just don't include that just to be a little bit more brief in the SQL that's there. But the basic parts are the list of the fields you want and then the from criteria. Now, if we go back to the beginning of what I said the use of a good SQL join is the ability to get data from more than one table. You see, in this case, it's just one table employee, but now I want the employee's position description along with this. Now, there are different use cases to the joins of the different types, and we're going to get into each of those. There are a few advanced ones we're not going to cover, but what I'm going to cover today are the 4 key types of joins that you will use, and that should cover about 95+% of all your use cases that you'll see and have a need for when it comes to joining data. So the first one I'm going to get into is called an inner join. Now, what an inner join is where you take 2 tables and you want the intersection of those 2 tables. So in my example, I want to list the employees and their positions with a position description. Now, to do that, I typed a SQL statement down below here that will give us that answer. Now, on this SQL statement, I added a few things that we didn't cover last week. The first is, you'll notice I'm doing a select and I'm listing the fields. Now, the first thing that you're going to see that's a little bit unique from what we covered last week is you'll see like an E dot employee and a P dot position. That portion in front of the field name is called an alias. And what that is doing is it's referencing which table I'm pulling the field from. So in this first example, I'm saying from employee, just like I did before, and then I put a space and the word E. And what that's saying is I want to refer to the employee table as E in this case. So I want E dot employee means I want the employee field from the employee table. And then I'm saying inner join position P. And so it's aliasing the position with a P. So it's P dot position. That means I want the position field from the position table. So it's the identifier of which table the field is coming from. So the minute you go to more than one table, you need to identify it. Now, you could spell out the full table name instead of using an alias. So I could have said employee dot employee and position dot position and position dot position description. but it gets a little bit verbose. So what you're going to run into a lot of times is people will put prefixes or abbreviations for their aliases, just so it's a little bit less typing to do. Then we get down to the key part of really what we're talking today, and that is a join. Now, this first join type is called an inner join. And so what you do is you type the words inner join between the tables that you're selecting. So employee E inner join position P means I'm doing an inner join. It's giving me all employees and their positions. And then you have to tell it, how do you relate those two tables? How does it know that there's a field in one table that I'm going to relate to the other table? There has to be some kind of logical connection between them. In this particular example, I have a position ID on my employee table, and I have a position ID on my position table. So I'm saying relate the employee position to the position. When you do that, it will, when you run the query, it will give you a combination of whatever employees and their matching positions that are there. Now, a key thing on this, on an inner join, it's saying that there has to be a matching record between the two. So my employee has a position number, and that same position number is matched up in the position table. And so it's going to include that intersection. So the example you see below here, I have two employees, employee 7 and employee 8, their position, and then their position description. So it gives you the join. Now, this is the most common join type that's there. So you'll see this one quite a bit. Now, when we go to the next type of join, we get into what are called outer joins. Now, there are different types of outer joins, and I typically use, so of the next two types, you're going to see a left outer and a right outer. I very rarely use a right outer join because what I do is I get used to thinking in this in a certain order from left to right. My brain functions a little more. So I typically only use left outer joins. I don't use right outer joins. And what a left outer join is where I want all the employees in their positions. However, I also want all the employees even if they don't have a position. So what you do on a left outer joins, it's saying, I want everything from the table on the left of this join syntax, even if there isn't a matching record on the right. So everything on the left, even if there's not on the right. So if you look up above in the little Venn diagram that I have, it's everything from the table 1, the left table, and the intersecting stuff from table 2, but it doesn't include anything from table 2 if it's not there. Now, the syntax on that is instead of typing the word inner join, you type the word left outer. So it's a left outer join instead of an inner. The on statement is still the same as the inner, and that is which fields relate those two tables. Now, the difference you're going to see on the result set between that is it's going to include all the fields from the left table. So in my case, the employee table. So I see record 7, 8, 9, and 10. Those are the employee IDs. And it's only going to include the data from the right table that exists. And so what you'll see in the columns from the right table, if there is a matching record, you'll see data showing up. So engineer 1, 2, 3, and then their description, and analyst 1, 2, 3, and its description. And for the records where it doesn't exist, you'll see null in the fields. So you're going to include all the employees no matter what in this particular case. If I look over at the next kind of example that I want to show here, with a left outer join, it's very important in the fields that you're displaying in the field list, you know what table you're pulling from. So in this particular join, I'm going to go back again. Oops. This particular join, it's showing me all the employee numbers, and then it's showing null for all the position records. See how they have P for the P dot position. If I would have instead switched to say I want E dot position in the fields to return, there is a position number on one of them, but it just so happened it didn't have a matching position description or a position record. So the records on the employee may or may not have values that you would expect. So I've got engineer 1, 2, 3, and analyst 1, 2, 3, which did match up. I have a blank position, and then I have some position in here that doesn't have a matching position. And you may see that in cases where a record got deleted in the other table or a bug in the application you're pulling data from, a variety of reasons. But just know that what you're returning could be very important as far as which field you're pulling from, even on the join. So it's still going to only include all the records from the left table. The right ones will be null if they don't exist. Now, if I go on to join type 3, which is the right outer join, this is the one that I said I rarely use. And the reason for it is you can get the same results with the left by just reorienting the tables that you're pulling from. So in this, what a right outer join table, right outer join does is return all the records from the right-hand table, whether or not there's a matching left-hand table record. And so the key on that is I find it's easier to always use left and then just know that I'm always saying whatever records I want from the table, always I'm putting on the left side of this join. So I could have put position where I have employee here on the left instead of the right and called it the left outer. You'll get the same exact results in that case. And it's doing the same thing, only it's saying I want all the records on the right, whether or not there's a matching record on the left. And the same rules as far as what's important in the field list at the top still applies here as well. Now, if I go on to join type 4, this is called a full outer join. And what that means is I want all the records from the left-hand table and all of the records from the right-hand table, whether or not there's a matching record. So it's kind of like a full intersection or a union across those tables. And what you're going to see here is you're going to see all the employee numbers listed down. I happen to have some positions, or one position in this example, CEO, that doesn't have an employee. So it's got a null employee, but it's got the position records and so forth. So when you get to a full outer join, just know it's saying I want anything from the employee table, whether or not there's positions, and I want everything from the position table, whether or not there's employees. So it's just kind of a big union of all of those. Now, there are other join types that are out there. You'll see some of the database providers provide some different terminology around other joins that are specific to them as well. But I'm not going to get into those cases because these 4 join types are really the key to what you need to be successful with that. So as I get back from the rest of this, what we're going to be covering, actually, I'm going to go back and show you a couple more a summary screen here, just so you can see that all in one screenshot, the 4 join types and a little bit of a picture of what you see across them and the types of records that are there. Now, next week's session, we're going to cover aggregations and other advanced SQL topics. So what aggregations are, calculations. So I've showed you everything at this time as far as how do I select fields from a table that already existed. The columns were already there, but maybe you want to do a sum of the salaries or a count of the number of employees, some type of calculation. That's called an aggregation. We're going to get into how to do that. And then I'll mix in a few other advanced SQL topics with that as well. So as we always conclude, if you do have any suggestions, feel free to send them to us at suggestions@info@dashboardgear.com, and we'd love to incorporate them in your next session. So thanks for joining us today.